Hello, and welcome to the Fuck It All podcast, where modern women redefine what it means to have it all. My name is Casey Lett Gordon, and I'm your host. I have the chance to sit down with Amanda Goetz today. Amanda is the CMO at TLHQ and the founder of House of Wise. We'll learn about both of those and how she's doing two jobs at once. Pro tip here, ladies. You're gonna want to tune in. So welcome, Amanda.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I was complimenting Amanda before we started because when I reached out to my network to tell them I was launching the Fuck It All podcast, Amanda and I had been, I can't remember where, I want to say we were tagged at a similar post or something where you and I crossed paths like virtually, I give air quotes on LinkedIn. And then as soon as I told people I was doing this, I had a handful of people, men and women, tell me, you need to speak to Amanda Goetz because she's redefining it all. And I thought that was so neat. And then I get an email from you that says, I have to be on the show. And I'm like, yes, fangirl moment. I love it. Fate is working in my favor. So here we are. And I like to start with every guest just because we all have a different definition of it all. How do you define having it all?
I define having it all by first figuring out what makes you happy, and then just figuring out how to make that work for you guilt-free. Like, it's
Oh,
okay if if your career makes you so happy and you derive so much fulfillment from that, and you don't love being a 24/7 parent, make that work for you. Focus on quality over quantity. Like, I just think that it's all about guilt-free and relieving yourself of that guilt that happens when you're trying to compare yourself to the next person.
guilt is I probably one of the strongest emotions I've felt throughout my life, and I'm sure tied to being a woman. And I think that's innate. Like we you get a group of women together and very quickly you'll start hearing them like discount themselves and start to like give those little tidbits of guilt. So I love that that is front and center when you're defining it all.
Yeah, like, I have a lot of stay-at-home mom friends that are feel the need to tell me what their career was before they became a stay-at-home mom. And
Yes.
I don't need to hear that. If you are happy, you are living life on your terms. Like, that is the thing. And so if you're out there and you're a stay-at-home mom, like, don't feel the need to be like, well, before I stayed home with the kids, I did X, Y, and Z. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, you're living life on your terms.
And I find that when you present yourself that way, just like confidently and not a qualifier, but period, this is who I am or what I'm doing right now, it becomes really freeing for those around you to similarly do that. And that's been the biggest journey and learning experience I've had recently is in doing this is people are so eager for others to lead by example. They want to similarly do that, but it's scary to be the first one.
Yes. I was like the first one to get married, the first one to have kids, the first one to get a divorce. And so every single time it's terrifying to do that. And everybody's kind of looking at you to set the example.
It really is. And so we'll talk about the being the first. That's interesting. And I find that there's a very specific personality trait that usually comes across as women who are comfortable leading in that. Um, but I find that every woman I talk to, she has several fuck it all moments, like on a personal front, on a, whether it's relationships, parenthood, friendships, career. But I find that there's usually one or two key ones that they point to, and that is like such a pivotal moment. And I'm curious for you, when I say that, what comes to mind?
The thing that pops in my mind immediately is filing for divorce. Like, I come from a town of 800 people in central Illinois, a very conservative Catholic family, and divorce was never talked about. And in fact, I remember, like, one of my aunts got a divorce and later remarried my uncle, like the same person.
That's a
But
movie waiting to happen.
right, but she couldn't take communion at church because she was divorced. And so, like, I grew up with all of this, like, if you're not happy, you make it work. But I wasn't happy and the relationship didn't work for me. And it wasn't that like it was toxic or bad. it was just, I had grown. I got married at 19. I had grown, my needs, my boundaries had changed, and the relationship didn't grow and adapt to those things. And I think I went to therapy for a full year, twice a week, before I made the decision, because I wanted to get to a place of like knowing that it was not an emotional reaction, that it was not my subconscious leading anything. And I remember when I filed, I was like, I no longer care what people think. This is my life. So just like, fuck it. This is what I'm doing to like be happy. And that was so freeing for me to like make that decision and then move forward.
I that takes so much, I mean, courage, honestly. I think that anytime we challenge or go against this, like our foundational beliefs that where we were brought up from, that to me is one of the deepest, like rooted pieces to overcome. And I think really marks for a lot of us when you feel like you really have stepped into your own is when you're willing to sacrifice those ties because of who you are today. I'm curious when that happened and share as you're able to, but was there like backlash from those around you? Was there expectation?
Yeah, I felt whenever I would share with people that I was going to be separating or that I was filing, um, a lot of people wanted a reason. And
Mhm.
I and I like there wasn't a reason, just it wasn't working for me and for us and for our family. And I the fact that everybody's like, well, if it wasn't abuse or
Mhm.
cheating, that's not a good enough reason. And that was what I like couldn't wrap my head around, that there are no right or wrong decisions in life. There are the ones that you make, and then you spend your life making that the right decision for you. That's it. And I just had to keep reinforcing to myself that that person is not living my life. They don't feel my stress, my anxiety, my depression. And this is on me to figure out, not for them. And that was really hard in the beginning, because I do have like this something inside of me that feels like I have to earn someone's love or attention.
Mhm.
And by going against the grain, all of a sudden it was like, are they not going to love me? And that's where the work, I was like, well, if they stop loving me, do I care? Like, what does that mean? And that was the work of like, I have to love myself enough to know that if somebody walks out because of a decision I've made, I'm still me. I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm still okay. But that was, I think, the work that I had to do prior to making that decision.
That's powerful. I think about, I've had several women on the show now and this theme of external validation and approval. And I I don't want to speak in generalities because I know there's so many nuances, but I have found that um, there's a very specific, whether it's that traditional type A overachiever that I don't, and I'd really, maybe you have thoughts on this, but it's like in order to be recognized in our lives, we have to be exceptional, or at least that's our belief.
Yep.
And so it's the exceptional because we start out as, young children and adolescents, we maybe don't know what that is. So we look to examples around us of what exceptional are. And those validators are, oh, hey, you got the good grade, or oh, you were great at sports, or oh, you're really pretty, or whatever those external validators are. And, I think it's interesting you getting married at 19 and the growth that happened over that period of time. Like you learned what you liked. And that's just like growing up. That's not you changing and like some sort of, it's just you becoming who you are and developing your own likes and dislikes. And
Yeah,
that, you 19, your examples or worldview is very different than when you're in your 20s and 30s, 40s, etc.
100%. And also, you're you become more aware of patterns, which make you curious. And I whenever you're like a growth mindset individual and you get curious and you're like, why do I have these patterns? And all of a sudden you start to peel back your own personal onion and you're like, oh, I have these triggers because of this. And that makes you so much more equipped to figure out what type of person or job or whatever fits well with your stuff. We all have stuff. We're all walking around with stuff. We all were raised as children, and whatever happened when we were children, too much love, not enough love, abandonment, like whatever it is, we all have stuff. And you are not aware that you have stuff at 19. Like, you just aren't. You are just like a bird coming out of that egg. Like, you do not know until you go through a little bit of life and you start to see how your stuff is pinging against other people. And you're like, why does this person keep triggering me? Or why did this relationship end? And all of a sudden you make your subconscious conscious. And now you can make decisions where you're in the driver's seat.
Completely. I'm curious because you said that you and your ex, you were together for, did you say 11 years?
Yeah.
So that's a significant amount of time. I mean, that's a decade of your life. I wonder between now, and I'm curious your perspective, 11 years ago, getting married at 19 years old, was that an expectation or a norm amongst your, family, social group? Because I think now I have, nieces and nephews that are graduating high school, and there's almost this expectation that it will happen in their late 20s, early 30s. And so I'm curious for you, was that part of the factor at all?
Yeah, definitely generational. Neither of my parents went to college. They got married, I think it was like 19 and 20 or 19 and 21, so very similar. And I was just raised in a time and a place like, rural America, where your identity came from your person.
Yeah.
Like, who you married informed your security, who you are, your place in the world. And when you're raised with my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she loved taking care of like my dad and making sure he had everything he needed. And so I love doing that in a relationship, almost to a fault, where I let my needs go. And that's where I realized throughout my 20s that, like, I have needs. I don't derive all my identity from this other person. And like, as my identity and my career and, growing a family and becoming a mother was so powerful. It gave me like a whole new perspective of my identity. But yeah, I definitely would say that growing up where I did, I mean, people used to joke that they were going to college to get their MRS degree.
Right. I never
Like,
heard that till I moved to Atlanta. I'm from Virginia. That was not a thing. And then I moved to the South and I start hearing this concept.
yeah. So you're going to college and so to me that's when I start to question, like, was it a check the box activity, or were you actually like going to find someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with? Is it more a race to get that done? So like, whew, okay, I got that figured out. Now I can go live my life. And that's a big part of like, I've had to learn that life is not about check the boxes, and life is happening right now, even if I haven't accomplished X, Y, and Z. And so I wish I could go back and tell 19-year-old Amanda that, like, your life is still going to happen whether or not you get married. Like, go explore, go do those things. But I have no regrets because of my 3 amazing kids. But I definitely, like, raising daughters, I'm gonna be like, don't think of life as a checklist.
That's I couldn't agree more in having my daughter, and I've shared this, on the podcast. That to me was one of those really transformational moments where I said, my value system, you start to really look at that. You look at things you would want them to model behavior after. You look at, that example, and it's things that maybe you were aware, but the stakes weren't as high before. And they
Right.
feel so high after I had my child, at least.
It makes me wonder what, like, the generation above us, what their role models were for parenting, because they didn't have social media. They didn't see other moms like setting different examples. And so their only like cultural imprinting was like TV, and TV at the time was like the perfect nuclear family where she had dinner on the table and a cocktail waiting for her husband, and that's all they saw. They didn't see social media and women of like all walks of life doing whatever the fuck they want. they couldn't see that. And so they were probably really scared to do anything else.
Totally. Or even know that it was possible. It's like you would dream up something, but you're like, I don't even know if that's a thing. Okay, so the woman I'm looking at right now, the woman who is, led companies, you were I believe it was the CMO at the Knot, like very large roles. You lived in New York City. You live, I believe, now in New York City. Quarantine. You're traveling a bit, or quarantining elsewhere. But what was that journey like from your small town to New York? I mean, that's a massive shift.
Yeah. So I went to a big college. I went to the University of Illinois. That was step one. Had no clue what I was doing. Like, my parents didn't go to college. I just always just was figuring stuff out on my own. And for better or for worse, I remember sitting in the orientation class and they were like, somebody leans over and they're like, how many AP credits do you have? And I was like, what's AP credit? Like, I didn't have that shit. What? You have credits and you're a sophomore right now? Like, what? I was so confused. But then, graduated college early because I was married and started my job at Ernst & Young, as one does, and, big four accounting firm in Chicago. Did that for a few years. And, I'm really lucky that I did marry someone who was very ambitious, and he was the one who got us to New York City. And that New York City opened up so many doors for me, and also just new people. Like,
Yeah.
meeting powerful women with a East Coast mentality when they were like, I'm sorry, you're 24 and married? Like, what? And those were conversations I was having. I was like, wow, they have a very different upbringing. They have a very different lens. That was really cool for me. And so New York definitely shaped, like, I've now lived there for over a decade, and started my first company when I was pregnant with my first child, did the founder thing, went to the Knot, led, brand there for the last 5.5 years. And now, yeah, doing this part-time CMO and doing the founder thing again, for different reasons this time, but it's all been not intentional. Like, every step, it's not like I had this like end goal in mind, but I will say that anytime I take a career step, it's because I'm trying to assess, am I still growing, and am I having an impact? Like, am I making a difference, whether it's to myself, like growing myself, or impacting those around me. And that's definitely like next phase of my career.
I agree with that so much, or it resonates with me around the growth and impact. When I left my most recent role, it was not because things were broken or any of that. It was because I couldn't tell you the last time I was scared to do something. I couldn't
Yes.
tell you the last time I had like nerves. I
It's
just felt like
such a fun feeling though.
it is. And I'm like, even just doing nothing. And I say air quotes, nothing right now. I'm not, I don't have a full-time gig. And even that gave me nerves. The ability to sit and say, do you know how to actually rest? That stressed, or, worked me up. And I'm like, I haven't felt this in a really long time.
Yeah, gosh, I love how you just said that. Like, when you do something that scares you, even if it is like resting, like that does scare me. Like, what does that say about me if I took a break? Um, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and honestly, I just like you telling that story of going to New York and hearing from these other women that you looked at, you admired, were influencing your world. They had an impact on you because you said, I now see representation of a different way. And
And
that's powerful.
yeah, and I felt seen and understood in a way that I hadn't. And not that, and I definitely have friends in the Midwest. So if you are in the Midwest right now, like, I would say that, like, generationally speaking, like, things are shifting and women don't think this way all the time anymore. But coming from a very small town and, then moving to New York City, I didn't feel like I saw a lot of women who represented what I felt inside of me all those years. Like, this like crazy drive and ambition to want to have power and success, and like even saying that now, I kind of cringe because I still feel like that stigma of saying like, no, I like to be in a position of power and calling the shots. And that was not like something I saw a lot of growing up. So when I came to New York and I saw women in the driver's seat, like, owning their careers, talking unapologetically about, oh no, I'm asking for a raise. Like I deserve more money. And I was just like, this is incredible. Like women know their worth and they're like powerful. And so that was cool to come to New York and feel that.
Totally. I wonder what the journey was, or if you can speak to. I have a couple moments in my life when I've been exposed to something else, and I then reflect on my own, who I am and things I want to change. And while it is exciting to recognize that and see that there's moments of growth, it's also very scary because that you could be leaving a version of yourself behind. You may make some people upset. I mean, that, you over your 11 years maybe grew to a point where, like you said, you evolved out of your marriage. And I'm curious, did you ever feel that, like that tear inside you of, I should be maybe content with where I am, but I know there's something more, and that struggle?
Yes. And for a long time, I took discontentment as a negative and saying that there's something wrong with me, that I don't love my situation, versus getting curious about my growth. And that's the difference, right? Like discontentment is just a signal for to get curious, to understand what's going on. And if you're discontent right now in your job, ask why. Like start to get curious with yourself and be like, what's not working here? If you're in a relationship and all of a sudden you're discontent, I think a lot of people, especially women, deal with like, I just need to be stronger, I need to work harder, like it's not working because I'm not putting enough into it. That was something that I definitely struggled with. And once I made the decision, it was letting go of the fact that this is not weakness.
Yeah.
Me making any of these decisions, whether like it's changing jobs, that's not a sign of failure or weakness. This is a sign of growth. And that mental shift is so hard to do. I can say that now, 2.5 years later, because it took a long time to get there. But like, that's the shift you have to make.
What were some of the tools or, people, whatever you use to get to that shift? Because I think it's a practice. It's something a muscle you have to build and continue to hone all the time.
Yes. I mean, emotional work is an ongoing thing. Like I have gone to therapy now for 3 years and I still go, like, because again, you still have your stuff and it's triggered again and you need to talk about it. Or if you're like me, I have a high need for venting. Like I have a high need to process something and talk about it. And most of the time, the people in your life, like your best friends or your partner, they're not good people to vent to, because one, it affects them. They're not meant to be your therapist. And two, like I like to come to people with like solutions versus just like venting. Whereas my therapist is paid to just listen to me.
Yeah.
Right. But when I think about those early days when, even just contemplating divorce, I remember like Googling a lot. And I realized very quickly that I was not seeking answers, I was seeking permission. And I'm like, Google's not going to pop out and become a human and say, you should do this. Like, I approve of this. Like, no one can give you approval for those things.
Yeah.
And so when I think about tools like therapy and doing that introspection work, because you have to know that you're in a stable place to make big decisions. And I had just had my third baby. So I had 3 kids under the age of 4.
Bless.
And and so postpartum depression was a topic. Like, is this postpartum depression? Am I going through something? And I was like, I am not making a decision until I can get to a place where I cannot say this without, like, I can say something without crying. Like I can say just matter of factly, like, this isn't working. Like, it's not because of any one thing. It just isn't working. I'm not happy. And I want to figure this out, what the next step is. And if I could say it calmly, that's when I knew I was ready.
That's a great tool just in general. I mean, I think that anytime we have, emotion, anger, sadness seething or dripping from something we're saying, then it may not be ready to hand off to the world yet, or to our partners or friends. And so being able to really sit with that. I found also that over the past few years, I've similarly poured into to being okay with what my decisions are. And I have found that um, there's a I have much better discussions with the people around me when I already have my perspective going into what I'm sharing versus coming to them with, fractions of the information and a lot of emotion. Because to your point, whether it's a parent or my husband or a friend, they care so deeply for you. They want to just alleviate the hurt
Yeah.
and or the stress or whatever. And so they may be looking for the shortest route to help you through something, not necessarily the right route for what you need.
That, and they mirror your emotions. My girlfriends, if they see I'm mad, they get mad with
Yeah.
me.
Who did it? Fuck
That
them.
what? Like, you deserve better. Like, go, you could, whatever. Like,
Yes.
whatever it is, they mirror me. And so if I'm sad, they'll be like, it's okay, we'll figure this out. Versus calling you on your stuff. Like, your therapist will be like, well, you might be, is that childhood Amanda coming through here? Like, are you angry because of this or something else? And so I definitely think that your friends and family are not the best for like big life advice.
Totally. I really, and the more I've been doing this and talking to women that have gone through this and just people, I feel like we should, at like 16, gift everyone a therapist that will stay with them for the next several decades. But I mean, job security for the therapist, and honestly, who would not benefit from that?
Oh my gosh, yes. 100% yes. Like, that's the biggest thing when my daughters start going through dating and all that stuff. Like, that stuff can tear you apart, right? Like, when you go through your first breakups, how do you process that? And now with social media, I I'm so thankful we did not have social media when
Yes.
I was in high school. And the thought of having to go through that when you are fragile and insecure and you don't know who you are as a human, I like, my kids will have therapists from the moment they need them.
Completely. How have you seen, you look at your experience of growing up and becoming the woman you are today, what are the responsibilities or expectations that you look at your kids with? What are some of the things that you are hoping to emulate and give them without maybe burdening them with some of the not so positive expectations that we've talked about?
Yeah. I think, and for people who want to give parenting advice, hold your phones for a second, but I try to be real with my kids about emotions. Like, I have sad days, I have happy days. I share with my kids when I'm having a sad moment, or like, I don't hide from them the realities of being a mom, having a career. I share with them when I'm stressed about work. I'll be like, mommy has a big meeting today. Like, I am really nervous that like X, Y, and Z. I try to let them into my life,
Yeah.
but I also like set boundaries about self-care too. And so I I do this thing now that the pandemic is happening and I don't have a commute. I do a commute bath. So once I'm done with work, it's usually around 4:30 or 5. Babysitter's gone. I'm on mom duty. The first 30 minutes I put for myself of like, I have to have a commute bath where I sit in the bathtub. I need a moment to switch modes. And I share that with my daughters of like, and my son, but he's still a toddler. But I'm like, I need a moment to decompress and like teach them what decompress means so that I can give you my full attention right now, because mommy's brain is going a mile a minute right now from all the conversations I just had. And I want to be able to play with you and actually play with you. So they've learned that I've got, I've, I've got to do that. So I think showing self-care is something that, like sometimes I'm going to put myself before them,
Yeah.
and that's the fact.
There's so many things that I took away from that. So one, it's not just demonstrating it, but it's also like vocalizing it. Like you said, I'm nervous because of this, not just demonstrating nervous behavior or running around or not being very talkative, but verbalizing it so they can understand what is going on. You mentioned like anxiety, depression, and I don't know all of your journey with that, but I've suffered from anxiety a lot. And usually it's the expectation that I'm feeling something that I shouldn't be feeling. And by normalizing that, like, hey, we are going to feel happy sometimes, you're going to feel sad sometimes. And seeing that as just a normal human existence without expectation. You don't have, there doesn't have to be a qualifier. I'm sad. Some days you just are sad, and being able to do that. And I think as a parent, I imagine, my daughter's only 18 months, so I'm very new into this journey, but I would imagine that it allows you to show up as a much better version of yourself. Like you said, like, I want to sit in the floor and play, but like, I need to go chill for a minute. So I enjoy that. And I'm not just sitting here, but not actually here.
Exactly. And a lot of it is just understanding your needs and then stating them. That is something that we as did horribly. And I think a
Same.
lot of women do horribly, of like, these are my needs and I'm going to set boundaries and hold to them because I know I will be a better partner, a better mom, a better colleague if I set those boundaries and stick to them. We have something inside of us that's like, we can handle it all. It doesn't mean we should, but we can. And we're like, oh, okay, I'll take on that extra thing. Yeah. It's fine. I don't need to work out today. I'll go do this thing. Like, if oh, you need me to pick that up. Yeah. And we just do that because we know we can, and we want to be helpful. But like, I love when I see someone hold to a boundary, even if it like affects me. And I'm like,
In a
wait a second,
negative way.
I would love that if you would do this for me. But like, bravo for you for setting a boundary and being like, I can't, I need to get off this call right now because, I need to go do this for myself or whatever. But so yeah, I just love, I don't do a good job all the time, but I'm more aware of the fact that I need to show my daughters how to stick to boundaries and not feel guilty for expressing that.
Totally. I find that when other people keep boundaries, it gives me the courage to do it. I tell my husband that a lot. He's in the middle of doing school and working full time, and he's really appreciate this in a partner, but he will not always take time for himself. And I shared with him the other day, he said he had a lot of guilt. And I said, it's subconsciously sending a message to me that if I take self-care, then yeah, I should feel guilty because I do need this. And so I would rather you openly say, hey, I need a night off, or I need to go blow some steam off with friends, or whatever it is, because then it gives me the permission when I'm feeling shit to say that. And it was a conversation. It was almost like this, like he wasn't expecting me to say that. He thought it would be a good thing, but he was like, no, I'm here. I'm grinning, grin and bear it through it. And I'm like, no, I need the permission to say those things. I found that it's been really, I'm someone that is so achievement oriented, and sometimes the long term, like self-care, it is so long term that it can be really difficult. It's not like, oh, I have a project in a month and I'm going to heads down and knock this project out. And parenting has been that similar thing to me. It's like, this is a marathon and we got a long way to go. And same thing with self-care. And so you can't do it in these spurts. You have to figure out like, what is a steady pace that you can sustain, because sustaining is far more important than doing everything and then breaking.
Yeah, like the once a quarter spa day doesn't work for me. I need like my daily bath. I need to work out. Like, you figure out what works for you. I need to figure out how to eat healthy because that, eating crappy affects my mood, like all those things play into it. Yeah.
Um, so I would love to talk a bit about your professional side because you've had some pretty awesome roles, and I think the one you're in right now, the work situation is unique, and I think it was bold for you to pursue it. So can you tell the audience a bit about what you're up to right now?
Yeah. So I was leading marketing at the Knot, the wedding company, and throughout the past couple of years, as I was navigating a divorce, I had three small children, and I felt like height of my career, I started to deal with anxiety and a lot of just like there were days that I would have to go from like a divorce meeting to like CBS Good Morning and do a media appearance, and so just the amount of like context switching was crazy, and so I started using CBD and microdosing THC, and that, again, being from a rural town in Illinois, like you would have thought I told my mom that I was like on like crazy narcotic, like whatever drugs.
In her
Um,
mind, you're like actually rolling a joint and doing, you're not like,
right, right. No, in her mind, I'm like full cocaine, like
yes.
in a lab making meth or something. I don't fully know, but so that stigma and what people would say, but then they were like, but wait, how are you handling all this stuff? Like, how are you dealing with your depression and anxiety and getting through kind of like all that I was dealing with. And so I would share that. And when people saw that I was like a high functioning woman that loved my kids, that I was not like a stoner, they were like, oh, well, how do you do it? Like, do you mind if I ask what brands you use? And so I all of a sudden was becoming just like this big ambassador for all these companies. And I'm like, I feel like there's an opportunity to build a company. And so I started to think about it. Um, and then over time, I started working with a team of chemists to develop my own product line. And it just slowly like took its shape. I've definitely been nurturing this project for a long time because it's scary to become a founder again. But when I realized that I wanted to do this, I'm not a typical founder. I'm not a 25-year-old guy that can just quit my job and live off of 25K a year and eat ramen every day. I have three kids. I am a single mom. Like I have to have health insurance. I need to figure this out. And I started to put out into the world that I love building brands. I love being a part of a startup. And I had heard on Twitter, someone tweeted out about part-time CMOs. I'm like, well, that sounds cool. Like, let me learn more. And sure enough, my paths crossed with the founder of Teal, and their mission is so in line with what I want to do with House of Wise. It's all about taking control of your career and being in the driver's seat and being intentional about every step and bringing your subconscious to the conscious and knowing what motivates you and what your communication style is and all these things that I'm like, so many people just jump from job to job without intentionality. And I'm like, this is awesome. And Dave's an amazing founder and a dad, and he was so excited about me being a founder again, and he was like, listen, let's figure this out, let's make this work. I will support you publicly, you can talk publicly about both companies. And so it just proved to me that we are entering this like wild west of, especially with COVID, of like everyone's working from home, passion, gig economy, all these things. You can be a content creator, you can make money from YouTube and TikTok and all these places. We are entering this whole new world of focusing on the outcome, not the output. And so it takes very clear expectation management and knowing what success looks like in your roles. But you can do like really, you can craft your own career. And that's really exciting to me. And so it was fun to share that. And I got a ton of DMs when I announced it this past week about like, I didn't know this was a thing. How do you go about doing this? And honestly, it's just figuring out what you want your next step to look like, and then just putting it out there and networking and just proving that you can do it.
Yeah, I think that sometimes that little bit of time, and I say a little bit relatively, but spending the time to articulate exactly what you want, and it's amazing the people around you. And I think, I'm believe in the universe and how it sends us what we need and when we need it. And but I think you have to be intentional and articulate about what it is you want. Like, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just, stumble and fall into your lap. It's that's very rare. It's usually that I've put some thought, and then you begin to recognize what opportunities do look like that. And you can very quickly say no to the ones that don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So you are how many weeks in now at Teal?
week 2.
Week
So
2. Oh, you're a newbie.
yeah.
Did you take any time off at all between your kind of corporate gigs, we'll say?
So I did. I took a couple of weeks. I was still helping support my team at the Knot, but I removed myself from meetings for the month of October. So I was still like, checking in with them, making sure that they had the support. If they needed me, they could call me. But I did take the month of October. I took my kids camping. I, worked on House of Wise, which for me, my energy comes from my work. And so, yeah, rest for me was like ideating where House of Wise could go and like letting my brain have awesome like spin cycles. And yeah, and so that was my recharge time, and now we're back in it.
I this morning was with a group of women. I'm taking a life design course, and one of the women, a lot of people around her had been telling her, "You should totally consider a sabbatical." And she said, "I don't really want one." Like, and I, the people's idea of rest is actually not restful for me. She said, like, I'm much more of an active rest. Like, it's nice to be able to have the freedom to do with my time what I want. That's amazing. And yes, I could maybe get better at the ability to do nothing, but I don't have a desire to take 3 months off and just sit.
Same. Her and
And
I would do well on vacation together.
yeah, you're reminding me so much of her. I will make an introduction after this. But it was interesting to hear that, because I think sometimes I'm almost 2 months into having left my job. I sometimes feel guilty that I'm like, I'm supposed to be resting. I need to sit down and I need to get a book. And it's so just hearing that other people's rest doesn't necessarily look like that either, that they, it can be the doing of things that is recharging, because that's really what is the outcome of rest. Is it truly to, refuel or recharge? Is it mental or physical? And I think even just defining the outcome of that can remove some of the judgment.
So I would, if you're listening, like I would say, are you staying busy to avoid feeling something, or are you staying busy because it's bringing you joy? Those are two very different things. I think sometimes we avoid rest out of fear of what we could feel, whether that's loneliness or anxiety. That is different than active rest. Like to me, the weeks, like I have 1 week without my kids every single month, and like I'm already plotting, I'm like, I'm going to like do all the Christmas decor, and I'm going to do organize my closet. To me, that is exciting and going to keep me like having fun. But I also know that I'm doing the work of processing feelings and emotions through therapy and through other things, that I'm not avoiding something. And I think that that's an interesting nuance to busyness.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I've been both versions of it. We'll say that.
We all have.
We all have. Okay, so as we have these conversations, I like to go a little rapid fire, because I think it's great to hear. Just I love, this is probably what I hear consistently, the favorite part of the show from everybody, because they just like to hear, where everybody's at. So, all right, I am going to go through a couple of questions. Finish this sentence for me. The best part of being a woman is.
The ability to do everything.
Love it. And I like what you said earlier, just because you can
Doesn't mean you
doesn't
should.
mean you should, but it's pretty cool to know that you could.
Yep.
Love that. Who do you admire?
Honestly, I admire this entire like generation of women who are just like getting real with all this stuff and making it okay. Like even for you to just start this podcast because like we've all had fuck it moments. Like let's talk about those instead of keeping them like locked in a closet and me doing this like perfect podcast about how easy it is to be a, you know, a CMO and a mom and a founder. Like no, that's not real life. And so I honestly just like kudos to anyone out there putting themselves out there, being vulnerable on social media when you have no clue how much that means to the people around you and the next generation.
Yes. And I think that we will, my hope, selfish hope, is that by people like you on the show, like you said, I'm a founder, I'm a CMO. Yeah, it's freaking crazy. I'm also a mom and, you know, all of these other things, that it will help people feel that if they're not perfect, that they can still achieve those things. Because
Yep.
I think that oftentimes, and especially women, I think this is true of everyone, but this is obviously a show about women. I think that we think if whatever the image we see, if we don't look or feel or have some of those check marks, then we can't reach that level. And the truth is that if we just give a little light into all the shit that's actually going on, I think we'll see a lot more women be brave enough to step forward and say, okay, I can try.
Exactly.
What's a simple pleasure that makes you really happy?
Can I say sex?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just like by
Sounds,
myself, with someone else, like
yeah,
you
awesome.
name it, all of the above.
All of the above. Um, when my power is shaken,
I call my favorite hype women. You know, you have some people in your life that you just call and you're like, I just had that. Like this morning, I had a weird call with one of my investors, and I called my friend Tori. We were Twitter friends first, and
love
she
it.
like hyped me up, and I was like, yeah, like I just felt better after the call. And again, maybe that's my venting thing, but get your hype women, get your people that you know that you can call.
I had a friend that called them her hell yeah women,
I love that.
and she would call her hell yeah women. And I
Yeah.
love that. I stole it. Okay. What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm moving slowly through The Road Less Traveled, which is a philosophy book. It's a very old book. Like, I think it's been out for like more than 20 years, but I love anything philosophy and just like helping you to be introspective about where you're at.
Yeah, that I feel like I would need a like a reading group with that. I would need a book club for that. Like if I'm going like really deep, I need something to help me foster conversation.
It's one of those books that you read a page and you're like, huh. And then you're like, I got to reread that again. And then it takes you like a year to get through it. But
2022, you'll be done.
yeah, exactly.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Honestly, I think I mentioned this earlier, but my therapist was very clear. She always says to me, there's no right or wrong answer. Make a decision with the information and feelings you have now. And then your work is just to make that the right decision for you. You're going to make a decision and make it work for you. Like there's no regrets in this life. And so it's that post decision work that we forget about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's all wrapped up in is that the yes or no or the right or left. And
Yeah.
it's
Do I
that's
take this job? Do I not take this job? Do we get married? And I mean, married is a different one, but like, do I stay with this person or
right.
break up or whatever, but yeah.
Totally. If you can tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
You're already a success. Like, stop trying to earn it. And no matter what, like, yeah, I would just say that. Like, I feel like we are a culture that it's always what's next, what's next. Oh, you built a community there, what are you going to do with it? You got that promotion, well, are you going to switch job? Like whatever it is, it's always the what's next.
Yeah.
you you are a success in whatever position, decision you have made, like you're doing it right
Preach, lady, preach.
now.
This has been a wonderful way to end my Friday afternoon.
Same.
I,
Love this.
I'm hopeful this is the start of a friendship because I have enjoyed this immensely, and just I hope for lots more conversations with you.
Yeah, I'll make a road trip to Atlanta soon.
Bring it on down, girl. All right, crew, we're signing off. This is Casey Light Gordon. I'm your host of the Fuck It All podcast, where modern women redefine what it means to have it all. Today, my guest, Amanda Goetz, has delivered that in spades.